Hey everyone, welcome to Popping the Recap. Today we're kicking off our Outlander journey with a deep dive into Season 1. Whether you're a longtime fan or new to the series, this episode sets the stage for the epic adventure that follows. Let's jump right into it. Our story begins with Claire Randall, the series' heroine, reflecting on how people disappear every day. Some explanations are clear, but not all. We get our first glimpse of Claire as she contemplates a simple vase in a shop window. It's 6 months after World War II, and Claire is adjusting to life after the war. We see a flashback of her as a decisive combat nurse, struggling to relax and celebrate VE Day, haunted by the suffering she's witnessed. Next, Claire and her husband, Frank Randall, are on a second honeymoon in Scotland, trying to reconnect after 5 years apart. While Claire was overseas, Frank worked in intelligence in London. Now, he's a history professor with a passion for discussing his interests, much to Claire's affectionate amusement. On their second honeymoon, they check into a charming bed and breakfast in Inverness. Claire's playful side shines through as she bounces on their creaky bed, much to the innkeeper's amusement. Frank is excited to explore local history, particularly Castle Leoch, despite it being in ruins. At Castle Leoch, Claire seduces Frank in the ruins, revealing that she's not wearing any undergarments, a bold move given the setting. This scene is meant to showcase their chemistry, though it feels a bit risky given the state of the ruins. They later visit Reverend Wakefield, who shares Frank's enthusiasm for Scottish lore. Claire, who was raised by an eccentric archaeologist, finds herself rescued by the housekeeper Mrs. Graham during a discussion about Jacobite history. During their visit, Mrs. Graham reads Claire's tea leaves, revealing an unusual pattern and predicting a strong-willed, passionate nature with a divided marriage line. Claire finds this intriguing, but a bit unsettling. As Claire walks back to the B&B, she reflects on Mr. Graham's words about the mysterious connection between the present and the future. Frank later sees a Scotsman in a kilt watching Claire through the window, but the man vanishes before Frank can get a closer look. Frank is puzzled and a bit shaken by this encounter. Claire, somewhat offended by Frank's suspicion that she might have been unfaithful, reassures him of her loyalty. They make up passionately in bed, though the tension between them is palpable. Frank mentions they'll be attending a pagan festival the next day. On the next day, they discover that the festival is shrouded in darkness, with torches and eerie movements. Claire and Frank explore the standing stones the next morning, where Claire decides to return later to search for a blue flower she noticed. When Claire returns to the stones alone, a strange roaring sound envelops her, and she is suddenly thrust into darkness. When she emerges, she's bewildered and disoriented, thinking she might be on a movie set. Claire's confusion escalates as she encounters soldiers and a gunshot. She stumbles through the woods and meets an English soldier who resembles Frank, but is actually Captain Jonathan Randall, Frank's ancestor and a notorious villain. Claire is quickly captured by Randall, who suspects her of being a spy or worse. Just as Randall prepares to assault her, she is rescued by a mysterious Highlander named Murtagh and his men. Claire's saviour, Murtagh, and his group of Highlanders are initially rough around the edges. Claire tends to Jamie, one of their men, who is injured. Jamie's first appearance is both dramatic and intriguing, and Claire's practical medical help leads to a moment of connection between them. Jamie, despite his pain, wraps Claire in his plaid, and they set off together. Claire realizes she's no longer in the 20th century, but doesn't yet know it's 1743. Jamie and the Highlanders ride through the night, with Claire trying to make sense of her new reality. As dawn breaks, Claire recognizes a rock from Frank's description of English ambushes and warns Jamie. The Highlanders prepare for battle, and after the skirmish, Claire is left alone. Jamie's gratitude and the Highlanders' shock at her modern expressions add to the episode's rich tapestry. The episode ends with Claire's voiceover.
So far, I'd been assaulted, threatened, kidnapped, and nearly raped. And somehow, I knew that my journey had only just begun.
It's a powerful closing that sets the stage for the trials and adventures ahead. On episode 2, we pick up right where we left off. Claire has been whisked away to Castle Leoch by the rugged Highlanders, led by Dougal Mackenzie. The castle is an imposing sight, and it's clear from the get-go that Claire is in uncharted territory. As soon as they arrive, we meet the warm but no-nonsense Mrs. Fitz, who quickly takes charge of Claire, giving her some much-needed food and even more needed period-appropriate clothing. But as much as Mrs. Fitz welcomes her, it's clear that Claire is already under scrutiny. Next, Claire shows off her 20th century medical skills when she tends to Jamie's wounds. As she does, she discovers the deep scars on his back, scars that tell a painful story of brutality at the hands of the English, particularly Captain Jonathan Blackjack Randall. Also, she learns more about Jamie's past, including the fact that he is a fugitive with a price on his head due to a previous altercation with the English, where he was accused of a crime he did not commit. The connection between Jamie and Claire deepens, but Claire is still haunted by thoughts of her husband Frank, whom she left behind in the future. Things take a more serious turn when Claire is summoned to meet the laird of the castle, Colm Mackenzie. Colm is a man with a commanding presence, despite his physical ailments, which Claire quickly diagnoses as Toulouse-Lautrec syndrome. But Colm is more interested in figuring out who Claire really is. Using a combination of charm and thinly veiled threats, he interrogates her, clearly suspicious of her story. Claire, knowing she must conceal her true identity and origin, tells him she is a widow who was travelling to France but was waylaid by the English and then rescued by the Highlanders. Later, at dinner, the scrutiny continues. Colm and Dougal subtly press Claire for more details about her past. Claire, trying to keep her story straight, nearly makes a fatal mistake when she refers to Dougal as young Hamish's father. The tension is palpable, and Claire realizes she needs to be much more careful if she wants to survive in this time. But it's not all doom and gloom. Claire finds an unexpected ally in Gaelis Duncan, a mysterious woman with a deep knowledge of herbs and medicines. Gaelis warns Claire that the villagers are suspicious of her and even suggests that some think she might be a spy. It's a warning Claire takes to heart. We also see more of Jamie's honourable nature when he steps in to take a beating in place of Leary, Mrs. Fitz's granddaughter. Despite his own injuries, Jamie chooses to spare the young girl public humiliation. This act of kindness doesn't go unnoticed by Claire or Leary. Just as Claire thinks she's about to escape this strange world and return to Inverness, Colm throws a wrench in her plans. He reveals that until he's sure she's not a threat to his clan, she's staying put, whether she likes it or not. Claire, now officially the castle's healer, realizes she's not just a guest, she's a prisoner. Alone and overwhelmed, Claire finally breaks down, realizing just how trapped she truly is. Episode 3 kicks off with a flashback to World War II. Claire and Frank are at a train station saying their goodbyes as Claire heads to the front to serve as a nurse. Back in the 18th century, Mrs. Fitz is helping Claire wash her hair. Claire is so comforted by Mrs. Fitz's motherly vibe that she imagines confiding in her about the truth, that she's from 1945 and Frank hasn't even been born yet. But in this imagined scenario, Mrs. Fitz freaks out, calls Claire a witch and slaps her. Luckily, it's just a daydream. Claire realizes she has to be very careful about who she trusts in this time period. Going on, Mrs. Fitz tells Claire that a big gathering is happening soon, with all the important Highlanders coming to Castle Leoch. She suggests that Claire's work as a healer might endear her to Colm Mackenzie, the laird. Frustrated that Colm is keeping her at the castle, Claire tries to use her 20th century medical knowledge in a way that won't freak anyone out. Soon, her surgery is bustling with patients, and even Colm seeks her help for his condition, which we know from the previous episode that is Toulouse-Lautrec syndrome. Later that night, the tension ramps up when Claire finds herself in a very awkward love triangle. She tries to chat with Leary about Jamie, but things get uncomfortable fast when Jamie joins them. He's clearly more interested in Claire than Leary, which doesn't go unnoticed by anyone, especially not Leary. Jamie even asks Claire to change his bandage, a move that leaves poor Leary holding Claire's wine goblet, feeling more than a little left out. Jamie opens up about why he avoids showing his back to people, explaining that he's tired of their pity. But Claire, who's had a bit too much wine, insists on taking off his shirt to check his shoulder. The air between them thickens with unspoken tension as Claire's fingers trace the lines on his skin. Yet, just as the moment seems to deepen, Jamie pulls away, leaving before the charged atmosphere can ignite further. The next day, Claire goes herb hunting with Garrison, who tells her about a planned exorcism for Mrs. Fitz's nephew, Thomas. Later, Claire visits the boy and quickly deduces that he's been poisoned, not possessed. However, his mother and the local priest, Father Bain, aren't too keen on Claire's interference. Claire is making enemies fast, and Father Bain is definitely not a fan of hers. Back at the castle, Claire spots Jamie kissing Leary in a corner, which stirs up some jealousy. At dinner, Claire can't resist teasing Jamie about his swollen lip, but he quickly shuts her up by stepping on her foot. Murtagh, noticing the tension, warns Claire that Jamie needs a woman, not a girl like Leary, hinting that Claire might be the perfect match for him. Later, Dougal takes Claire to visit Garrison at her home, where they witness Garrison's husband, the local magistrate, passing judgment on a young boy for theft. Claire's compassion shines through as she convinces Garrison to spare the boy's hand from being chopped off. Instead, he's sentenced to an hour in the pillory, but Jamie helps Claire free the boy by staging a fainting spell to distract the crowd. Determined to save Thomas, Claire convinces Jamie to take her to the Black Kirk, the abandoned monastery where the boy was supposedly contaminated by Satan. Claire discovers a poisonous plant that Thomas must have eaten, mistaking it for wood garlic. Despite Father Bain's threats and his claim that Claire reeks of hellfire, she saves the boy's life, earning both admiration and suspicion from the locals. That night, Claire listens to the bard in the Great Hall, and Jamie translates the Gaelic song for her. It's about a woman who lived among strangers, touched magical stones, and travelled back to a man she had left behind. This folktale hits close to home for Claire, reigniting her determination to escape back to the stones, even if it means risking everything. Claire is caught between two worlds, trying to navigate the dangers of 18th century Scotland while still holding on to the hope of returning to Frank. This episode kicks off with what seems like Claire making her daring escape from Castle Leoch. She's running, a sentry almost ready to shoot. But wait, it's just a game with the castle children, and she's actually scoping out her escape route. But it's not all fun and games. When she falls down, she gets an unpleasant view of what Angus isn't wearing under his kilt. Claire heads to the stables to pick out a horse for the upcoming gathering. As she approaches, Alec is busy tending to the horses. With a calm demeanour, she starts asking about the horses, though it's clear her thoughts are on something else, her escape. Alec, wise to her distraction, points her toward a horse named Brimstone, praising its strength and reliability. Back in her medical scullery, Claire gets an unexpected visit from Garrison. Garrison immediately jumps to conclusions, assuming Claire's stash of food means she's pregnant. Claire's startled and denies it, but when Garrison presses on, Claire admits her husband isn't alive, though not exactly dead either. Garrison then moves on to another topic, valerian root, which Claire is using as a sleeping potion. Garrison's probing makes Claire nervous, and she's more determined than ever to get away. In the next scene, Mrs. Fitz later drags Claire away from her escape plans to dress her up for the gathering, which is not just a party, but a time for pledging loyalty to Colum, the Mackenzie laird. In the Great Hall, Colum presides over the ceremony, while Dougal is the first to pledge his loyalty. Claire, however, uses the opportunity to slip away, but not without Angus tailing her. To shake off Angus, Claire tricks him into drinking port laced with valerian, knocking him out. She then encounters Leary, who bizarrely asks for a love potion to win Jamie's heart. Claire plays along, giving her some harmless horse dung to sprinkle outside Jamie's door. Next, Claire's escape attempt takes a dark turn when she's nearly assaulted by some drunken clansmen. Dougal steps in to save her, but then steals a kiss, which Claire responds to by knocking him out with a chair. She rushes to the stables, only to find Jamie there. He quickly figures out her escape plan, but warns her she wouldn't get far with the entire Mackenzie clan after her. Just as they're about to leave, some drunken clansmen drag Jamie into the hall, forcing him to take part in the gathering. Jamie has been avoiding the gathering because he doesn't want to pledge loyalty to Colum. It's a tricky situation that could cost him his life. But Jamie pledges loyalty to his own clan while showing respect to the Mackenzies, leaving everyone in the hall holding their breath. Colum accepts Jamie's careful maneuver, and the hall erupts into relieved cheers, signalling that the night's celebration can finally begin. The next day is the big hunt, and Claire mocks the men for chasing a single pig, but Rupert humorously corrects Claire's mistake by pointing out that the creature they're dealing with is a wild boar, not just a pig. Claire's nearly trampled, but Dougal saves her just in time. Unfortunately, there's a casualty that Claire can't save, and she and Dougal share a somber moment as a man named Geordie dies. Later, Dougal visits Claire and thanks her for helping Geordie die peacefully. He then announces that she's coming with him on a trip to collect rents from Colum's tenants, and off they go at first light. Claire is hopeful this journey might bring her closer to the Standing Stones and her way home. Claire's escape plans are foiled, Jamie navigates some dangerous politics, and Dougal shows a more complex side. Will Claire ever make it back to the Stones? The episode starts with Claire on the road, accompanying Dougal and the Mackenzie men on their annual rent-collecting trip. In a moment of reflection, Claire escapes to the water and recites a poem, only to be joined by Ned Gowan, an Edinburgh lawyer turned adventurer. Ned is a potential ally, and Claire quickly bonds with him. Their conversation about the poem shows Claire's sharp mind, though there's some debate over its true author. Later, Jamie tries to lift Claire's spirits. Although she's enduring the crude conversations of the Scots, Claire feels increasingly mistrusted. She becomes concerned, seeing villagers tithing to Dougal, leaving themselves with very little, and starts to suspect Dougal might be lining his own pockets. At one village, Claire befriends some women singing while softening wool with urine. She learns that Craigh is just a 3-day journey away, but before she can get too hopeful, Angus barges in, dragging her away. Suddenly, a young Englishman, seemingly out of nowhere, asks if Claire is all right. Dougal claims she's their guest, and Angus insults the man until he retreats. We soon learn he's a redcoat when he dons his uniform, adding another layer of tension to the scene. The road trip settles into a routine. Collect rent by day, hold court in pubs by night. Claire, frustrated by her lack of Gaelic, can't understand what Dougal is up to until each night he reveals Jamie's scars to the crowd, a tactic that makes Jamie visibly uncomfortable. The journey takes a darker turn when they encounter a house being burnt down by the Watch. The owner is suspected of being a traitor, and Claire is horrified when the Mackenzies loot the place. She refuses to eat stolen food, leading to a tense moment when Angus pulls a knife on her. Jamie steps in to calm things down, warning Claire not to judge them too quickly. As Claire picks up more Gaelic, she finally understands Dougal's true intentions. He's raising funds for the Jacobite cause, hoping to bring Bonnie Prince Charlie back to Scotland. This revelation ties into a flashback Claire has of Frank and Reverend Wakefield discussing the doomed Jacobite uprising. Claire now knows Dougal's motives are political and not criminal. Dougal confronts Jamie, asking if he's committed to the Stuart cause, reminding him that a Stuart king could save his neck. Jamie, however, asserts that his neck is his own concern. Dougal insists that Jamie's scars will continue to be used as a rallying cry for the Jacobites, much to Jamie's frustration. That night, the group stays at an inn, and Claire finally gets to sleep in a real bed. But when she hears a noise outside, she opens the door to find Jamie sleeping in the hallway. He's there to protect her from drunks, but Claire insists he take a blanket and sleep inside the room on the floor. Jamie is shocked at the suggestion, worrying about her reputation. The next morning, a brawl breaks out in the taproom, and later, as Claire tends to the men's wounds, Murtagh reveals that they were defending her honour. This marks a turning point in Claire's relationship with the men, and she even manages to crack a lewd joke about Rupert, earning their approval. As the group passes over Culloden Moor, Claire has another flashback, this time to Frank explaining the devastating loss at the Battle of Culloden in 1746. She realizes the battle is only 3 years away and wonders how many of the men she's traveling with will die there. Down by the river, Dougal corners Claire again, demanding to know who she really is. Before things escalate, the young Englishman from earlier, Lieutenant Jeremy Foster, appears with a group of redcoats. He asks Claire once more if she's all right and whether she's with the Mackenzies by choice. Dougal tries to dismiss him, but the tension is palpable as Claire contemplates her response. As the tension rises, Claire's choices become more critical, and each decision draws her deeper into a complex web of loyalty and survival. With uncertainty looming, the stakes have never been higher for her journey. We start right where we left off, with Lieutenant Jeremy Foster offering Claire a chance to escape. Claire hesitates, but ultimately decides to say she's the guest of Clan Mackenzie. Despite her loyalty to Dougal and the Mackenzies, Foster insists she come with him to meet his commanding officer. Dougal, although he despises the English, agrees to accompany her. General Sir Oliver Lord Thomas, an English officer, welcomes Claire to dinner, but the tone quickly turns sour as he and his fellow officers start insulting Dougal. Dougal keeps his cool and suggests they should have stayed in London if they didn't like the local accent. Claire, despite having been on the road for weeks, blends in effortlessly with the English officers, who are delighted to be in the company of a refined Englishwoman. Everything seems to be going well until Captain Jonathan Randall storms in. The tension between Claire and Randall is palpable, but they both pretend not to know each other. Lord Thomas, unaware of their history, suggests that Randall escort Claire to Inverness, but the conversation takes a dark turn when Randall tells Claire about a gruesome incident involving a Scottish prisoner. Claire, trying to keep her composure, points out the atrocities committed by both sides, which doesn't sit well with the English officers. Randall seizes the moment to accuse Claire of being too familiar with Dougal, suggesting that she's sleeping with him. Claire, enraged, defends her honour and the rights of the Scots, which only further alienates her from the Englishmen around the table. A skirmish breaks out nearby, and Claire offers her medical expertise, shocking the English officers who didn't realise she was a healer. She warns Dougal to lay low since the English will be looking for someone to blame, and then proceeds to assist with a gruesome amputation. When Claire returns to the dining room, she finds that everyone has left except for Randall, who's having a shave. This scene is particularly chilling, as Claire has a flashback to a similar moment with Frank, but this time Randall is far from affectionate. He dismisses his servant and begins to interrogate Claire, claiming that her outspoken nature makes her loyalty questionable. Randall then tries to manipulate Claire, pretending to apologize for their past encounters. Claire, wary, agrees to be as honest as Randall is, but it doesn't take long for Randall to show his true colours. He labels Claire as either a trollop or a spy, forcing her to come up with a story about being betrayed by a lover in Scotland. Randall doesn't buy it and demands information about Dougal's Jacobite activities. When Claire refuses to cooperate, Randall threatens her with torture. The episode then delves into a harrowing flashback of Jamie's flogging at the hands of Randall. Randall's sadistic pleasure in the act is evident, and it's clear he's trying to break both Jamie and Claire. In a twisted turn, Randall forces his servant to kick her while she's down, showcasing just how ruthless and sick he truly is. But just when things seem dire, Dougal bursts in to save Claire, threatening to start a war if Randall doesn't release her. After the confrontation, Dougal and Claire escape. Dougal leads her to St. Ninian's spring, where he makes her drink from the water. According to legend, anyone who drinks from the spring must tell the truth. When Claire insists she's not a spy, Dougal finally believes her. But there's another catch. To protect Claire from Randall, Dougal proposes that she marry a Scotsman. Dougal tells Claire that the only way he can keep her safe from Captain Randall is to convert her to a Scottish citizen by way of marriage. He then proposes that she marry Jamie. Claire is initially horrified at the idea, but Jamie agrees to the arrangement. As the weight of the situation sinks in, Claire does what any of us would do. She gulps down a stiff drink. Meanwhile, Jamie heads back to the men, ready to go through with the wedding. Claire's choices grow more difficult, and the only way to secure her safety is through a marriage she never expected. With danger looming, her future takes an unexpected turn. The episode begins with a poignant flashback to Claire's first wedding with Frank, where they impulsively marry at a registry office. As Claire and Frank kiss, the scene transitions seamlessly to Claire's wedding with Jamie, a visual reminder of the complicated emotions she's grappling with. The newlyweds are alone in their wedding chamber, both understandably nervous. Jamie suggests a drink to ease the tension. He makes a gallant toast, and despite his eagerness to consummate the marriage, he reassures Claire that she has nothing to fear. He's not going to rush her. When Claire asks why Jamie agreed to marry her, we get a flashback to Jamie's conversation with Dougal and Ned Gowan. Jamie's primary motivation: to protect Claire from the clutches of Captain Randall. But when Dougal makes a crude comment about Claire, Jamie's protectiveness kicks in, making it clear that if she's to be his wife, she'll be treated with respect. Jamie's words affects Claire. She's beginning to realize the depth of his commitment to her. They almost share a kiss, but before things can get too heated, Rupert and Angus burst in to check if the marriage has been consummated. Jamie shoos them away, and Claire, seeing no way out, suggests they go to bed. Jamie helps Claire out of her corset. The tension builds as they kiss, and Jamie's earlier claim that he's a virgin, not a monk, comes to life. Afterward, as Claire starts to feel guilty about Frank, she steps out to get some food, only to be ambushed by the Mackenzies. She's mortified, but Jamie swoops in, shielding her from their lewd comments and guiding her back to their room. Jamie tells Claire about Dougal's resentment and the warning not to let Claire have too much power over him. Claire secretly enjoys this, but not without another sip of whiskey. The mood shifts again when Jamie tenderly calls Claire Moni and Dawn, meaning my brown-haired lass. It's the first time he's used this endearment, and you can practically feel the swooning through the screen. We get a flashback to Jamie's preparations, where he insists on looking his best to honour his late mother. Despite the hardships, Jamie's focus is on making their wedding day as special as possible. When the time comes for the wedding, both Jamie and Claire look stunning. The ceremony takes place in a candle-lit church. As the priest declares them husband and wife, Dougal adds a Gaelic vow of unity, binding their wrists together with a small cut. Claire is deeply touched by the care Jamie took to make their wedding day memorable. This newfound appreciation leads to a more intimate moment, where she shows him that his scarred back doesn't repulse her. The scene is tender and sensual, marking a turning point in their relationship. But just when things seem perfect, Claire has another unsettling encounter with Dougal, who suggests she could still sample other pleasures. His implication is clear, but Claire stands firm, declaring, "I'm Jamie's wife." Returning to the bedchamber, Jamie presents Claire with a string of pearls that belonged to his mother. The couple shares another intimate moment, this time filled with genuine affection and passion. The next morning, as Jamie heads downstairs for breakfast, Claire is left alone. While gathering her things, she accidentally drops her wedding ring from Frank, symbolically watching it bounce across the floor. For a moment, it seems like it might disappear forever, but she retrieves it and places it back on her finger alongside her new ring from Jamie. As Claire grows closer to Jamie, her past with Frank continues to haunt her, leaving her torn between two worlds. Each step forward deepens her inner conflict, setting the stage for further emotional struggles. We start off in the 20th century, where we get a look at Frank's perspective on Claire's mysterious disappearance. Despite 6 weeks of investigation, the police have no solid leads, and they suggest Claire is likely with the Highlander Frank saw lurking outside her window. Frank is furious with their lack of effort and insists that his wife is not with another man. It's clear that Frank's frustration is reaching a boiling point. Meanwhile, we cut to the 18th century, where Claire and Jamie are enjoying a picturesque picnic on a mountaintop. Jamie, with a mix of shyness and awe, asks Claire if what they share is typical between a man and a woman. Claire reassures him that their connection is indeed special. Just as things are heating up, their romantic moment is interrupted by an arrow. But don't worry, it's not another threat to Claire's safety. It's Jamie's old friend Hugh Monroe, who, despite being mute from past torture, manages to communicate vital information. He presents Claire with a piece of amber containing a dragonfly and informs Jamie about a deserter named Horrocks who might help clear Jamie's name. Over in the 20th century, Frank's only confidant, Reverend Wakefield, has been collecting newspaper clippings and brainstorming theories about Claire's disappearance. We're introduced to Roger, the Reverend's nephew, who was adopted after losing his parents in the Blitz. Roger's presence hints at future developments. Frank's despair drives him to a bar, where he meets a mysterious woman named Sally. She offers information about the Highlander in exchange for money. Frank, showing surprising skills, manages to fend off some thugs who try to rob him, suggesting that his wartime experience has not left him completely defenseless. Back at the vicarage, Reverend Wakefield advises Frank to move on. Frank asks if the Reverend believes Claire left willingly with the Highlander. Quoting Sherlock Holmes, Wakefield suggests that the truth might be found by eliminating the impossible. Mrs. Graham, the housekeeper, adds a twist to the tale, revealing legends about Craigh and time travel. She believes Claire might have travelled through time and hints that some travellers return. Frank, sceptical but intrigued, decides to visit Craigh one last time before leaving for Oxford. Meanwhile, back in the 18th century, Claire is learning to use a knife from Angus, but their lesson is cut short when two English deserters attack. One holds Jamie at gunpoint, while the other tries to assault Claire. Claire, drawing on her training, manages to stab her attacker, allowing Jamie to defeat the other soldier. The aftermath leaves Claire shaken and angry at Jamie, though she soon realizes her frustration is partly with herself for not trying harder to return to Frank. As they near Craigh Claire decides to make a run for the stones, hoping to return to her time. This scene is visually stunning, with Claire racing towards the stones and Frank wandering among them in his time, calling out her name. Their connection is palpable as their voices seem to echo across time. Just as Claire reaches out for the stones, she's intercepted by redcoats, leaving Frank alone and devastated. Claire is taken to Fort William, where she encounters Captain Randall. He remains suspicious and warns her of the torture he's capable of. Claire tries to bluff her way out, suggesting that Randall consult the Duke of Sandringham, but her deception is soon discovered. Captain Randall's cruelty escalates as he prepares to torture Claire. Just when things seem dire, Jamie bursts into the scene, declaring, "I'll thank you to take your hands off my wife." Captain Randall recognizes Jamie, and his laughter grows more sinister. As Frank and Claire's paths seem to converge across time, the tension builds to a dramatic cliffhanger. With danger looming, their connection feels both close and impossibly distant. In this episode, we're seeing these events through Jamie's perspective, thanks to his voiceover. This change in point of view is a bold move, but it's a bit disorienting, especially given the sensitive nature of the scenes. It's a stark shift from Claire's perspective, which might have been more impactful here. Jamie arrives just in time to save Claire, bursting into the room just as Captain Blackjack Randall threatens her. The fight is ruthless, with Jamie eventually overpowering Randall and knocking him unconscious. The rescue and subsequent battle are hard to follow due to the chaotic nighttime raid. The pacing is disjointed, making it challenging to fully grasp the urgency and stakes of the situation. After Claire is brought to safety, things take a strange turn. Jamie confronts Claire about her reckless actions and chastises her for endangering herself and their group. His comments about a wife's duty to listen to her husband feel out of place and spark a fierce reaction from Claire. Claire's response is intense as she lashes out about not being treated as property and the oppressive norms of Jamie's time. This outburst feels somewhat abrupt, though it's clear that her recent trauma and the clash between her modern values and Jamie's 18th century views are fueling her anger. The episode's most controversial moment comes when Jamie decides to punish Claire as a form of retribution. The scene is baffling, not only because of Jamie's justification that he's adhering to tradition, but also due to the oddly light-hearted music and the comically exaggerated spanking scene. Jamie's punishment of Claire, complete with his admission of enjoying it, adds a layer of complexity to their relationship. It's portrayed in a manner that clashes with the gravity of the situation, leaving viewers with mixed feelings about Jamie's actions and the episode's tone. The aftermath sees Claire being sidelined, with her bruised dignity becoming a point of mockery among the men. Her reaction, portrayed as petty, feels unjust given the trauma she's endured. Meanwhile, back at Clan Mackenzie, tensions are rising between Colum and Dougal. Colum is furious over Dougal's secret funding of the Jacobite cause, which threatens to spark internal conflict. Jamie steps in to mediate, suggesting a compromise that satisfies both brothers. Jamie's diplomatic efforts help diffuse the tension and bring a semblance of peace to the clan. This resolution mirrors the reconciliation between Claire and Jamie, suggesting that both personal and political conflicts can be resolved. By the river, Leary boldly tries to kiss Jamie, her longing obvious. Jamie, caught off guard, pulls away with a mixture of shock and discomfort. The moment is charged with tension as Leary faces the sting of unreturned affection. In the scene after the river, Jamie, holding a sword, solemnly vows to Claire that he will never raise his hand against her again. His declaration is a powerful promise of his commitment and love, underscoring the deep bond between them. Jamie discovers a small, sinister object in the room, a token from Leary meant to cause him pain. He reveals it to Claire, and they both grapple with the unsettling implication of Leary's jealousy and the danger it poses. The episode attempts to address the consequences of Jamie's actions through an intimate scene between the couple. Claire's dominance at the beginning, followed by a shift in the power dynamic, serves as a metaphor for their relationship. It's a complicated and nuanced portrayal of their bond. The episode opens with Jamie and Claire enjoying some moments of intimacy in their bedroom, showing a momentary respite from the tensions around them. Jamie's romantic moves are interrupted by a constant knocking on the door. Murta appears to inform Jamie that the Duke of Sandringham has arrived to meet with the Laird. Jamie sees this as his chance to prove his innocence, but Claire, with her knowledge of the 20th century, doubts he'll get a fair shake, knowing that Sandringham is connected to Blackjack Randall. Despite her concerns, Jamie pushes forward and teams up with Ned to come up with a plan. Claire, however, is wary of the Duke and warns Jamie to be careful. At the same time, Claire seeks her own form of justice. She confronts Leary in the kitchen about the curse she found under the bed. Leary denies it and hurls insults at Claire, only to be met with a slap from Claire. The slap forces Leary to admit that she was behind the ill wish and that she bought it from Claire's friend, Gaelis Duncan. The focus shifts to Gaelis Duncan, a mysterious woman with a deep interest in the occult. Gaelis invites Claire to a ritual in the woods where she performs a strange and mystical ceremony. She confides in Claire about her pregnancy and reveals that the father is none other than Dougal Mackenzie. Next, we have Claire using her knowledge of the Duke of Sandringham's political leanings, which she learned from Frank, to blackmail him. The twist here is that the Duke's political interests are the focus of Claire's threat, not his scandalous secrets. This clever move works, largely because of the Duke's respect for Jamie. However, the Duke is not going to let things go so easily. He demands a pound of flesh in return, which comes in the form of Jamie as his second in a duel against the MacDonalds. In true Outlander fashion, the duel is less about serious combat and more about tradition, dancing, lazy shooting, and then sharing drinks. Despite the apparent formality of the duel, the underlying animosity between the Mackenzies and the MacDonalds explodes into a full-blown brawl. Outlander fights are always a mix of the brutal and the comic, and this one is no exception. It's a riotous fight that leaves Jamie with a fresh scar. Back at the castle, Jamie gets a stern talking to, figuratively unfortunately, when Colum finds out about his fight with the MacDonalds. His punishment? He has to escort Dougal back to Dougal's home. Dougal is being sent away because of his affair with Gaelis. To make sure Jamie stays in line, Colum orders Claire to stay behind. Later, when Jamie predictably tells Claire to avoid Gaelis, she can't resist. Her curiosity leads her straight to Gaelis, only to have both women arrested for witchcraft. Their arrest is orchestrated by a smirking Leary, adding another layer of danger to Claire's already precarious situation. As Claire and Gaelis are taken away, it's clear that no matter how assertive and resourceful Claire is, whether calming Dougal, blackmailing the Duke, or stitching up Jamie's wounds, she remains vulnerable in this unpredictable and dangerous time. After being arrested for witchcraft, Claire and Gaelis find themselves at the bottom of the thieves' hole awaiting trial. Gaelis believes that Dougal will come to their rescue, but Claire knows the reality. Dougal has been banished from Castle Leoch, and Jamie is busy escorting him home. In other words, no one is coming to save them. Their fate becomes even clearer when they enter the courtroom. Not a single soul from the castle is there to support them. But a hero steps in, Ned Gowan, who arrives to defend Claire and Gaelis. Witnesses are called one by one to testify against our alleged witches. First up is the Duncans' housekeeper. She claims to have seen Gaelis selling love charms and that Claire was in on it. Ned discredits her by painting her as a bitter ex-employee. Then the mother of the changeling child Claire tried to save accuses Claire of preventing the fairies from returning her son. Once again, Ned flips the narrative, blaming the mother for not stopping Claire from interfering. In a moment of respite, back in their dark and dank hole, the tension between Claire and Gaelis slowly dissipates. Gaelis knows she's not long for this world. She admits to secretly diverting her husband's money to support the Jacobite cause, and explains that it was politics and their mutual commitment to Scottish independence that brought her and Dougal together. The second day of the trial brings a surprising witness, Leary Mackenzie. In court, Leary testifies that she asked Claire for a love potion, but claims that Claire used it on herself to steal Jamie. Ned dismisses her as a jealous girl with a broken heart. Father Baines steps forward, and though he appears to be making amends, he subtly manipulates the crowd into believing that Claire is a witch, without explicitly saying so. His intentions are confirmed by the hideous smile that creeps across his face. In a private moment, Ned tells the women that only one of them can be saved. He offers Claire the chance to leave Gaelis and save herself, but Gaelis, ever pragmatic, accepts her fate with a dark sense of humour. When it comes time to throw Gaelis under the bus, Claire can't. The court finds them both guilty and chaos ensues. But the cavalry arrives in the form of one James Fraser. He demands that Claire be released, and Gaelis takes matters into her own hands, declaring herself a witch and revealing her devil's mark, a smallpox vaccination scar. At that moment, Claire realizes the truth. Gaelis is also from the future. As Gaelis is dragged to the stake, Claire and Jamie seize the moment to escape. Safe for now, Jamie confronts Claire. He's seen her devil's mark and needs to know, is she a witch? And in the most heartbreaking scene of the season, Claire tells Jamie the truth about everything, about her time travel, her knowledge of Blackjack and the Duke of Sandringham, and Jamie believes her. The next morning, Jamie brings Claire to the stones, and her face shows a mixture of shock. He tells her that they must part, as her future lies beyond the stones. Jamie decides to stay at the campsite until nightfall to ensure their safety. Claire, torn between her two rings and the choice before her, finally gets up and walks toward the stone as the screen fades to black. But in the end, Claire makes her choice. She finds Jamie and tells him, "Take me home to Lallybroch," and with tears in his eyes, Jamie nods. Claire's secrets are revealed, and she faces a life-changing choice. In the end, she chooses Jamie, setting the stage for their next chapter at Lallybroch. The episode begins with Jamie and Claire on their way back to Lallybroch, Jamie's ancestral home. Claire lightens the mood by telling stories about the technological wonders of the future, but as they approach the estate, Jamie's mood changes. He's anxious, haunted by memories of his last visit and his brutal encounter with Captain Jack Randall. Jamie tells Claire the disturbing rumours he's heard about Randall's abuse of his sister Jenny, but Claire urges him not to jump to conclusions until he talks to Jenny. When they arrive, they're greeted by a very pregnant Jenny and a little boy she introduces as Jamie's nephew, young Jamie. Things quickly turn sour when Jamie, assuming the worst, accuses Jenny of carrying Randall's child. Offended, Jenny escalates the situation, even calling Claire a trollop. The tension between the siblings is intense, but it's broken by the appearance of Ian Murray, Jenny's husband and Jamie's old friend. Inside the house, Jamie demands that Jenny explain what really happened with Randall. Jenny recounts the traumatic event, how Randall tried to abuse her but struggled with his arousal. Jenny's laughter at his impotence enraged Randall, who knocked her unconscious. When she awoke, Randall had left, taking Jamie with him. Jenny's story clears up the misunderstanding, but she's still hurt by Jamie's earlier accusations. Claire intervenes, insisting that Jamie owes his sister an apology. This causes some tension between Claire and Jamie, highlighting the gender roles of the time. Later, Jamie and Claire retire to the laird's bedroom, where Jamie shares memories of his father and the last time they were together before Jamie was taken by Randall. Jamie confesses the terrible choices Randall offered him, and how his father's death was a direct result of witnessing Jamie's brutal whipping. Claire comforts Jamie, reminding him that none of this is his fault. The next day is quarter day at Lallybroch, a time when tenants come to pay their rent. Jamie, perhaps too eager to embrace his role as laird, spends more time socialising than actually collecting rent. Meanwhile, Claire intervenes to protect a young boy, Rabbi McNabb, from his abusive father and asks Jamie to handle the situation. However, Jamie's approach is clumsy and shows his inexperience in managing the estate. Things take a humorous turn when Jamie tries to fix the broken mill by taking off his clothes and going into the water. But the mood changes when a British patrol arrives. Jamie hides underwater, and just as the situation seems hopeless, the patrol leaves, mistaking Jamie's shirt caught in the mill for the problem. Jenny sees Jamie's scarred back for the first time, and it's a powerful, silent moment. That night, Claire talks to Ian, who offers wisdom on the ongoing conflict between Jamie and Jenny. Claire takes his advice and confronts Jamie, insisting that he stop playing a role and start being himself. This confrontation is a turning point, leading Jamie to visit his father's grave the next morning, where he and Jenny finally reconcile, each blaming the other for the past, but ultimately finding peace. The episode ends on a high note as Jamie and Claire share a tender moment in their bedroom. Jamie professes his love for Claire, and she admits that for the first time since arriving in Scotland, she feels like she belongs. But just when we think all is calm, Claire wakes up the next morning to find Jamie being held at gunpoint by two men who threaten to kill him in front of her. So, who's got the gun on Jamie? Jamie and Jenny reconcile, bringing some peace to Lallybroch. But just as calm sets in, the episode ends on a cliffhanger with Jamie's life in sudden danger. Life in Lallybroch is anything but peaceful when members of the Watch arrive for one of their regular visits. The Watch, led by Taran Macquarie, is a group of mercenaries who offer the locals protection from the British for a fee. Jamie is immediately suspicious of them, seeing them as little more than thieves, but Ian, who is familiar with their ways, assures him that they are the closest thing to an army the Scots have. Jamie is forced to pose as a visiting cousin to avoid drawing attention to his fugitive status. The tension is palpable, as any misstep could expose his true identity. Things become even more complicated when a red-coat deserter from Jamie's past, Horrocks, arrives at Lallybroch. This is the same man who previously blackmailed Jamie, and now he's back, threatening to reveal Jamie's secret to the Watch unless he's paid off. With little choice, Jamie agrees to meet Horrocks in secret, but the situation quickly spirals out of control. Horrocks demands more money, and when Jamie refuses, the confrontation turns deadly. Jamie is left with blood on his hands, but now that Horrocks is out of the way, Jamie finds himself in a new predicament. To maintain his cover and protect his family, he has no choice but to join the Watch on their next mission. Meanwhile, as all this chaos unfolds, Jenny goes into labour. With the village midwife unavailable, it's up to Claire to deliver the baby. Despite her medical knowledge, Claire faces a challenging and dangerous birth. The scene is intense as Claire guides Jenny through the difficult process, showing her strength and determination at a critical moment. Back with the watch, Jamie and Ian are drawn into a dangerous raid against the British. The mission quickly goes south with devastating consequences. Jamie is caught in a deadly situation that could endanger not only his life, but the lives of everyone at Lallybroch. Despite the danger and tension, there is a moment of joy when Jenny successfully gives birth to a healthy baby boy, thanks to Claire's efforts. But even this happy moment is overshadowed by the growing threats surrounding Lallybroch. Tensions at Lallybroch escalate with the arrival of the Watch, leading to a deadly encounter for Jamie and a dangerous mission. Despite Jenny's successful delivery, the threat to their lives remains ever present. The episode begins with Ian returning to Lallybroch with devastating news. Jamie has been captured by the British. But in true Fraser fashion, Claire doesn't waste a moment. She and Jenny immediately set out on a rescue mission, determined to find Jamie before it's too late. Claire and Jenny quickly pick up the trail of the British patrol and spot Taran Macquarie, but there's no sign of Jamie. Tension runs high as they intercept a British courier, hoping for news of Jamie's whereabouts. Relief is brief when they learn that Jamie has escaped, but the danger is far from over. With her newborn baby waiting at home, Jenny has no choice but to return to Lallybroch, leaving Claire to continue the search. But she's not alone for long. Murtagh soon joins her, bringing his own unconventional methods to the rescue mission. Murtagh's plan is both bold and clever. He decides that they must make their presence known far and wide, hoping that Jamie will hear of their efforts and find a way to contact them. To that end, Claire takes centre stage, singing in pubs across the country. In a surprising twist, she uses a very modern tune that captures the attention of the crowds. But despite their best efforts, news of Jamie is slow to come. Weeks pass as they travel from town to town, their anxiety growing with each passing day. Just when it seems they may never find him, they finally receive a message. But it's not from Jamie. The long-awaited message is from Dougal, and the news is grim. Jamie has been captured again and is now being held in Wentworth prison. This revelation is a devastating blow to Claire, but she's more determined than ever to save her husband. The episode opens with Jamie trapped in Wentworth, suffering under the relentless cruelty of Blackjack Randall. He endures brutal physical and psychological torture as Randall attempts to break his spirit. Each day brings new horrors, but Jamie clings to the hope that Claire will rescue him, demonstrating his resilience in the face of despair. Meanwhile, Claire, driven by desperation and love, devises a plan to infiltrate the prison. She teams up with Murtagh and Dougal, who are equally determined to help. Claire reflects on the life she and Jamie share, strengthening her resolve to face the horrors that lie ahead. Upon entering Wentworth, Claire is struck by the oppressive atmosphere. Dark, dank corridors echo with cries of suffering, a stark reminder of the brutal conditions inside. As she makes her way deeper into the prison, her heart races with fear and determination. Her goal is clear: to reach Jamie and bring him home. In the depths of the prison, Jamie's situation worsens. Randall's sadistic nature emerges as he employs psychological tactics, taunting Jamie with the knowledge of Claire's presence. Each encounter drives Jamie to despair, but he refuses to surrender. His resilience stems from the love he shares with Claire, underscoring the power of their bond. When Claire finally reaches Jamie, their reunion is filled with tension and emotion. They exchange frantic words, aware that their time is limited and that Randall's threats loom over them. Jamie's dire situation weighs heavily on Claire, but seeing her rekindles his spirit and reminds him of what he is fighting for. Randall's manipulation reaches a critical point when he forces Jamie to make an impossible choice, pitting Claire's safety against Jamie's dignity. This moment tests Jamie's limits and their bond. Claire, witnessing Jamie's agony, feels anger and a fierce determination to protect him. This emotional weight underscores Jamie's character and the complexity of their relationship. The episode begins with a desperate and dangerous plan to free Jamie from the clutches of Blackjack Randall. Murtagh, Claire, Angus, Rupert and Willie pull off a daring rescue and manage to get Jamie out of Wentworth prison. But victory comes at a high cost. Jamie is badly beaten, both physically and emotionally shattered by Randall's horrific abuse. The group finds refuge in the Abbey of Saint and de Beaupre, where Claire tries to treat Jamie's physical wounds. But the real battle is in Jamie's mind, as he relives the torment and abuse he has endured. The scenes are haunting, showing the depth of Jamie's trauma and the struggle Claire faces in trying to reach him. As Claire tends to Jamie, she realizes that healing his body is only part of the challenge. Jamie's spirit is broken, and he is drowning in the trauma Randall inflicted on him. It's heartbreaking to watch Claire refuse to give up on him and fight to bring him back from the brink. In a powerful moment, Claire finally manages to break through Jamie's defenses, helping him face his pain and begin the slow process of healing. It's a testament to their love and the unbreakable bond they share, even in the darkest of times. With Jamie's recovery still fragile, they realize that staying in Scotland is no longer an option. The group decides to set sail for France, hoping for a fresh start away from the horrors they've endured. Before leaving, they bid an emotional farewell to Angus, Rupert and Willie, who stay behind to continue the fight in Scotland. As they set sail, the journey takes a surprising turn when Claire reveals to Jamie that she is pregnant. It's a bittersweet moment, filled with hope for their future, but also with the weight of the trauma they carry. Jamie's reaction is a mixture of joy and disbelief, marking the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. And so Outlander Season 1 comes to a close, a powerful, emotional ending that sets the stage for the challenges and adventures to come in Season 2. What did you think of Jamie and Claire's journey in this finale? Let us know in the comments below. See you next time as we delve into Season 2 of Outlander. Until then, Slán Java.